It's my great honor to have this opportunity to share with you part of my book, Making Multiple Babies. I'd like to thank first Molly for your kind invitation and all the organization to make this talk possible. Today's talk mainly comes from chapters 2 and 3. It's about the anticipatory governance of assisted reproduction in Japan and Taiwan. And human beings are producing more twins, triplets, and quadruplets than ever before. Twin Peaks is the title of the recent article published in Human Reproduction. The British team studies the global twin rates and find that twinning is happening in human beings more than before. Besides twins, human beings are producing more triplets, quadruplets, and other higher order multiple births. It is an increasing use of assisted reproductive technologies that create more multiple babies. One is egg stimulation drug. Women take this drug to produce more eggs, sometimes leading to multiple pregnancy. The left photo shows the headline news of the birth of quadruplets, 6 babies, caused by fertility drug in London in 1968. One baby died immediately after birth, and the other 5 were sent to intensive care. The right one is, which was last known to the world, is a quintuplet born in Kagoshima in Japan. The Japanese media followed the 5 babies with joy and curiosity. Another medical procedure that leads to the making of more multiple babies is embryo transfer during IVF. The public medical intervention to make so-called test tube babies. The first test tube baby was born in 1968. One of the procedure of IVF is to implant the embryos into women's womb. And doctors, practitioners quickly found out that if you implant more embryos, and the pregnancy rate would increase, and so does the multiple birth rate. As early as in 1985, data in Australia and New Zealand shows that 68% of the cycles transferred during IVF transfer at least 3 embryos. And the right one shows data presented by the UK doctor, which shows that he implanted more than like 7, 8, up to 11 embryos, and you can see the pregnancy rate also increased. So it's not surprising that the world has produced more IVF multiplets. World's first IVF triplets were born in South Australia in 1983. Dr. Christopher Chen, as the photo shows, was holding one of the triplets. World's first IVF quadruplets were born also in Australia in 1984. The practitioner implanted 4 embryos, which led to the birth of the quadruplets. World's first IVF quintuplets were born in London. So the list can be endless, but probably the most famous multiplet is the ultraplets, 8 babies born in California in 2009, conceived by implanting 12 embryos during IVF. So the media has called the mother, Nadia Suleiman, as an octomom. The multiple birth rate of IVF varies by country. According to the recent report by ICMAR, based on the 2011 data, Taiwan has world's highest twin rate, followed by the US, Egypt, and India. In Taiwan, 35% of women pregnant with IVF carried multiples, and more than half of the test tube babies were twins and triplets. By contrast, Japan, Sweden, Finland, New Zealand, and Australia had very low multiple birth rates after IVF. There were different responses to having multiple babies. One typical narrative is an extra joy of attaining hope. The left one came from a blog of an American couple who suffered infertility and eventually had twins brought through IVF. They say, "We were twice blessed." The right one is the world's first IVF triplets born in Australia. When they celebrated their 30th birthday in 2014, the media continued to call them the so-called IVF miracle triplets. The mother named the firstborn daughter Chanera after the IVF doctor, Dr. Chen, to show their appreciation. So making multiple babies, making miracles for some families. Historically, IVF has been framed as hope technology. The world's first test tube baby, Louis Brown, was born in the UK in 1978. Scientists celebrated their medical breakthrough. Robert Edwards, the one on the left among the team, was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2010 for his development of IVF. From the very beginning, it was portrayed by the media as a miracle, and hope was born for the people suffered from infertility. Sarah Franklin, the sociologist, conceptualized IVF as hope technology. Making multiple babies meant, in her book, being too successful. Indeed, multiple pregnancy and birth has also been viewed as the leading complications of ARTs. It increases the maternal and infant health risk greatly, including death. Some twins are healthy, but it is estimated that half of the twins were born premature, and the preterm babies suffer higher health risks. Babies from higher order births, such as triplets, quadruplets, face serious health problems. WHO, public health officials, pediatricians, and health economics gradually express concern over the increasing rate of multiple pregnancy caused by IVF. For example, this 1989 Lancet article asked to evaluate efficacy, safety, cost, and benefits of IVF. And the leading safety issue is multiple pregnancy. Feminist and women's health movements such as FinReach, Feminist International Network of Resistance to Reproduction and Genetic Engineering, built in early 80s, criticized exaggerated efficacy of IVF, the harm to women's health, and the medicalized of infertility. For example, the birth of the Foster septuplets, 7 babies in California in 1985. 4 died and 3 survived with a serious disability, was used by feminist Janice Raymond as a textbook case of how fertility treatment could go wrong. And she emphasized that much of the reproductive technology is brutality with a therapeutic phase. And her list of medical violence against women includes multiple pregnancy and fetal reduction. So how do we understand these palpable stories of life and death and events of making multiple babies? How do we explain the global variation in the multiple birth rate related to new reproductive technology? In my book, I propose that we think with the concept of anticipation. I have been inspired by 2 waves of literature. In recent years, feminist and SDS literature has been engaged with the conceptualization of anticipatory regimes, which means the apparatus of power regarding thinking and living toward the future. New knowledge making, being, time, and effective mobilization are the 3 major components. The classic examples might be climate change and emergent new technology. And I think anticipation is perfectly useful to analyze making multiple babies. In addition, social studies of ARTs have not used the concept of anticipation directly, but they address the ideas of anticipation in different terms. Many of the feminist scholars have researched how pioneering scientists envision medical breakthroughs and the IVF market and the so-called promissory capital, estimations of benefits, risk, cost for regulatory reform, how IVF becomes hope technology, while egg freezing is the practice of anticipating infertility. Inspired by this literature, I use anticipatory regimes as the overarching framework for analyzing the world of making multiple babies. In the book, I highlight two dimensions: anticipatory governance and anticipatory labor. I define anticipatory governance as the totality of actors, rules, processes, and mechanisms concerned with what to think and how to act now for the future. I defined anticipatory labor in this context as women's thinking and doing during conception, pregnancy, and childbirth to achieve the better futures they perceived. For my book, the first two chapters is about the global and anticipatory governance of making multiple babies. And the next two chapters is about the case in Taiwan. And the last three chapters are about women's anticipatory labor. So today I would like to focus the contrast between Japan and Taiwan to elaborate the anticipatory governance, as Japan has the lowest multiple birth rate and Taiwan has the highest. I regard making multiple babies as the exemplary side of anticipatory governance because first, it involves both sides of anticipation, success and value, hope and risk. Therefore, we can examine how stakeholders, scientists, medical societies, states, feminists, media, and the users of IVF select specific dimensions of anticipation to act upon making multiple babies. And there is global diversity of governing multiple pregnancies. So it would be helpful to analyze how national contexts, such as the national sociotechnical imaginaries of emerging IVF, shape the governing trajectories of making multiple babies. And let's start with Japan. Suzuki Mazukuni at Tohoku University Hospital developed the first successful IVF birth in Japan in 1983, roughly 5 years after the birth of Louis Brown in UK. If I need a term to describe the early development of IVF in Japan, that would be controversy. Before the birth, the team conducted a survey of 300 Japanese infertile women about their worries about IVF. 67% of them said that they would worry about the birth defects caused by chromosomal abnormality. In other countries, because of the manipulation of the embryo during IVF procedure, the general public also worry about the health of IVF babies. However, in Japan, I argue that the discourse of doubts around Japan's IVF development was related to other highly publicized controversies on the topics of technology and health since the 1960s, such as Minamata disease on the left, which was linked to environmental mercury pollution, causing some serious children's illness, and WADA heart transplant on the scandal on the right, which led to the debates on brain death in Japan. These controversies were widely reported in Japan and involved lawsuits with large payouts. So the media wondered whether IVF might be another troublemaker. To reduce the worries over experimenting with IVF, not only from the public, but also from their medical colleagues, 3 university-based IVF teams from Tokushima University, Keio University, and Tohoku University showed their capacity to implement strong self-regulation. Their actions included establishing an IRB system, founding a new society for IVF research, and creating a code of ethics. So when the first test baby was born, Dr. Suzuki showed the media a photo of himself delivering the newborn that did not show the baby, creating some suspicions that the infant might be deformed. He was then the president of the Old Japan Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology, JSOG. JSOG issued its ethical guideline for doing IVF exactly at the same time. JSOG became the main governing organization for IVF in Japan. To respond to the public's doubts about IVF, they took several actions to show their capacity for self-regulation. They announced the ethical guidelines, initiated the registration system for IVF clinics, and established the voluntary registry data reporting. So to respond to the public concern of IVF, JSOG did a lot of self-regulations. In early period of IVF, JSOG leaders showed their concerns for the health outcomes of IVF. For example, in this 1991 report on IVF registry data, the committee noticed the high incidence of miscarriage and multiple pregnancy, and emphasized that the main goal of this technology is not pregnancy only, but the birth of a healthy baby. The annual report lists every single case of birth defect, which is not a common practice in other countries. The annual reports continue to do so even today, showing how much they care about the issue of abnormal birth outcomes of IVF. After this first controversy of IVF in Japan, I'm going to show another wave of controversy. It's about fetal reduction. Fetal reduction is a medical procedure to reduce the number of fetuses during women's pregnancies. As the graph shows on the right, practitioner may use various methods to, like injection of some poison to for some fetuses to reduce like 3 fetuses into 2. However, the first case reported formally was in Sweden in 1978. It's a twin pregnancy. The practitioner terminates one genetic abnormal fetus to keep another healthy one survive. Without this procedure, in the past, you either abort all or keep all. But they invented this medical procedure in order to keep the healthy one. Since mid-1980s, this fetal reduction gradually was applied to the so-called grand multiple gestations, like quadruplets and quintuplets. And the first fetal reduction case was done by Dr. Nezu, and he reduced 4 fetuses to 2. For a quadruplet pregnancy, it's caused by fertility drug in 1986. He called this procedure as a surgery to save some of the multiplets, because the main purpose for him was to protect the health of remaining fetuses and the mothers. However, Dr. Nezu's operation caused a lot of doubts because it was regarded as violating the abortion law. Abortion has been legalized in Japan since 1948, very early. The Japan Association of Obstetrics and Gynecology for Maternal Protection, which was a medical organization, supervised the practitioners who operated abortion. The JLGMP argued that the fetal reduction violated the abortion law because the fetuses died inside the womb without being expelled outside the body, as happens in the standard abortion procedures. This controversy gave JSOG another incentive to avoid making multiple babies in the first place, so that clinicians did not need to do fetal reduction. Since the late 1980s, some medical society around the world or the states started to make guidelines to limit the number of embryo transfer during IVF. UK, it's up to 3, France, 2 to 4, Germany, it's 3. So Japan's medical society issued a guideline in 1996 to require 3 embryos or less. Those were the first guidelines made in East Asia. In JSOG's guidelines, it also advised the practitioner to use egg stimulation drug carefully. But it's up to 3, for example. We can imagine that still the practitioners' practices like 3 embryo transfer may still lead to the birth of triplets and twins. So we need to consider the IVF market. as important factors. In most countries, in early stage of IVF, it is highly privatized, not integrated into the public healthcare system or covered by national health insurance. So Carrie Thompson's concept, promissory capital in the IVF enterprise is crucial to figure out whether the better practices such as single embryo transfer works or not. Aspiring parents pursue quick success to save money. So clinicians pursue high success rate, often with the promise of multiple embryo transfer to attract clients. So to implement the single embryo transfer became the new agenda. So the new goal and new agenda is to provide public financing for privately paid IVF. In other words, to redistribute the cost and hopefully reassemble the IVF. The Belgian project is a well-known success story. In year 2003, the state reimbursed up to 6 ART cycles and required single embryo transfer for women who were under 36 years. The Belgian leader of IVF, Willem Ambellet, claimed that although Belgian infertility specialists were aware of twin epidemic and knew about the possible advantage of a single embryo transfer, only a financial incentive made the difference. However, he also singled out Japan as an exception. One of the exceptions is Japan. In this country, ART practices seem to be regulated by rules and moral policy of a society without any stringent regulations. It's surprising that Japan obtained 86% of single embryo transfer in year 2012, compared with near 60% for Belgium. I think it is the third controversy that lead to the high incidence of a single embryo transfers in Japan. It is the interprofessional conflicts between IVF specialists and neonatologists that became another important force to push Japan to issue the single embryo transfer guidelines. Twins and triplets often need intensive care. That creates new burdens for practitioners in the neonatal intensive care. They criticize IVF specialists for creating this burden of care. So one opinion leader told me in an interview that the reason we, JSOG, introduced single embryo transfer was because of the very strong pressure from the neonatologists. Greenwich also had the branch in Japan. So the radical feminist group in Japan also criticized how IVF created health risks. This gave the medical societies another source of pressure to implement more preventive measures. JSOG also seized the opportunity of a new state subsidy program to promote single embryo transfer. The Japanese government initiated the IVF subsidy to boost the birth rate. It was a pronatalist policy. The rationale is totally different from that in Belgium. The Japanese government did not issue any guideline on the number of embryos to transfer. The purpose was to make more babies, not to reduce multiples. However, JSOG transformed it into a financial incentive to persuade the practitioner to practice single embryo transfer, with around 40%, as the graph shows in mid around 2008. Of course, subsidized, women might be more willing to try one embryo at one time because if the first failed, it was less costly to try again. So JSOG issued a single embryo transfer guideline in the year of 2008. I argue that it was the wave of controversy from the early social concern about IVF and the interprofessional disputes about IVF pioneers about fetal reduction, and the interprofessional conflicts between IVF doctors and neonatologists about neonatal care, that step by step to intensify the ethical responsibility of HSOG leaders and members to act upon preventing the risk caused by multiple births. And now let's move to Taiwan. The first test tube baby boy Zhang, was born in Taipei in 1985. It was headline news for the several days in Taiwan for several days and widely celebrated as a medical breakthrough in Taiwan. If I need a keyword, that would be glory. The celebration of this first IVF baby in Taiwan needs to put in the context of Taiwan's political situation in the 1970s. Taiwan went through several diplomatic setbacks, including being withdrawn from the United Nations and facing the loss of formal diplomatic relationship with the US. Taiwan needed something to regain confidence to move away from its orphan of Asia identity. Gaining international visibility from medical achievements gradually came to become Taiwan's national sociotechnical imaginary. For example, on the left, the photo shows the surgery to dissect conjoined twins in 1979. This event was broadcast live on TV in Taiwan for 12 hours. It was celebrated as a first in Asia event. So IVF joined the wish list of ways to demonstrate national power by achieving a medical miracle. After successful cases in Singapore and Japan, the timetable for Taiwan to achieve IVF became more and more urgent. For example, the media urged Taiwanese doctors to make the test tube babies successfully as soon as possible so that this could increase the international status of Taiwan. The birth of the first test tube baby was actually the fourth in Asia after India, Singapore, and Japan. But still, the whole country treated it as a nationalist pride. The photo on the right shows Taiwan's first IVF family happily cutting the cake with the medical team. There was no such party in Japan, for example. In contrast to the worries about abnormal babies in Japan, experts in Taiwan emphasized that IVF babies might be healthier because only the fetus embryos will survive in a lab. There was also a domestic discourse about the first in Taiwan. There was strong rivalry among hospitals to achieve nation's first IVF success. So with the winner strongly promoted their achievement. So the media followed the baby boy Zhang closely. He became the father himself in 2015. The media mistakenly identifying him again as the Asia's first test tube baby, showing how the discourse of national pride persisted over 30 years later. By comparison, Japan's first test tube baby girl died when she was 1.5 years old. Her story was seldom told by the Japanese media. To respond to the national celebration, the state followed the patterns of family planning to establish an ad hoc committee of ARTs in 1985. In the beginning, among the 11 committee members, 6 were medical doctors. Even though the states got involved with the regulation, ARTs very early, the medical society remained the dominant in policymaking. The committee helped issue the ethical guideline, the regulation, and other regulations. The Taiwan Society for Reproductive Medicine, TSIM, was founded in 1990s. Since then, TSIM gained stable bargaining power in the government's ART policymaking. In 1988, 2 sets of quadruplets were born, and they were presented by the media as exciting news and medical miracles, although they were all born premature and put in the incubators. The next day, a 3rd set of quadruplets caused by fertility drugs were born and all died immediately. So the media gradually criticized the increasing incidence of making quadruplets. So facing the increasing prevalence of high order multiple pregnancy, doctors in Taiwan started to use fetal reduction as the technical solution. Fetal reduction was first presented by doctors as another medical breakthrough to celebrate with, and fetal reduction has become the integral part of IVF as a routine practice solution, a routine technical solution for multiple pregnancy. In year 2002, when the first registered data was revealed in Taiwan, it showed that doctors implanted 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 embryos. And when the global data on the number of embryos to transfer during IVF was first available in 1999, it showed that Taiwan has the highest number of embryos, more than 4, followed by the US, South, and Korea. By contrast to embryos were the standard practice in Finland, Sweden, and Australia. So IVF created more and more premature babies. This was a criticism from the Premature Baby Foundation and pediatricians. They started to criticize the health risks that IVF practices created since the late 1990s. So the early response from the medical society was to build informed consent, patient organization, and finally, clinical guidelines. In year 2005, TSRM announced its first voluntary guideline. TSRM did not follow the guidelines from the UK and Japan. TSRM preferred the American guideline. So on the one hand, some of the doctors, Taiwanese doctors, were trained in the US and were familiar with the American model. On the other hand, the US 2 to 5 guidelines, 2 embryos to 5 embryos by age, depending on mother's age, were quite similar to Taiwan's status quo. So by following the American guidelines, Taiwanese doctors did not have to change their practice much. So TSRM followed the American model and made it more lenient. Some interviews call me that they call it the American model +1. They were the world's most lenient guideline at that time. When Taiwan's Department of Health drafted the Assisted Reproduction Act in early 2000s, feminist legislator Huang Shuying proposed limiting the number of embryos to no more than 4. As the leaders of women's health movement, she was concerned with the health risks of multiple pregnancy that women face, but she was also worried about the risk of low success rate. She did not want women to repeat IVF too many times. Her attempt to achieve balance was to propose up to 4. Again, this became the world's most lenient legal regulation on number of embryos to transfer. Despite Taiwan's ultra-low fertility rate, IVF really covered by national health insurance before 2021. So basically, larger market has ruled the IVF industry. To reach the success rate first has become the major goal for practitioners and users. Both doctors and users prefer multiple pregnancy transfer, and some women, some of them eager to have twins. So IVF has become a good business. Dr. Li Maoshen has been the leading IVF entrepreneur in Taiwan. He even applied to break the Guinness World Record by gathering more than 1,000 test tube babies, doting pink heads, as I show on the right, and arranged in a shape of the island of Taiwan in 2011, the year Taiwan celebrated its 100th national birthday. So business is booming and the national glory continues. TSI revised its voluntary guidelines several times. As you can tell from this table, they were far from promoting elective single embryo transfer. The contrast between Japan and Taiwan is revealing. When IVF emerged in East Asia in early 1980s, it was linked to the management of a controversy in Japan, achievement of national glory in Taiwan. This at least explains why Japan governed IVF through strong self-regulation to establish social trust, resulting in JSOG model to impose single embryo transfer guideline to efficiently reduce the risk, health risk, which has far from being the case in Taiwan. And I think more such imaginaries were worth exploring to enrich our understanding of why anticipatory governance takes so many different forms around the world. Today, there's a great national variation in single embryo transfer rates. For example, in Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, and Japan have the highest single embryo transfer rate. Taiwan and the US have the lowest, around 20s. No wonder Japan has the lowest IVF twin rates in the world, and Taiwan has the highest. So conclusion. For today's presentation, I think in anticipatory governance of assisted reproduction, I have shown 3 layers of power dynamics are at work to explain why a country like Taiwan has the world's highest twin rate after IVF, while its neighboring country, Japan, has the lowest. The first layer consists of how stakeholders frame and act upon their selective dimension of anticipation, risk prevention, for example, in Japan, but glory in Taiwan by the medical doctors and the media, for example. And the second layer consists of the power dynamics among science, state, and society vis-a-vis national sociotechnical imaginary of assisted conception, ranging from viewing IVF as a national pride to seeing as a troublesome invention. And the third layer involves the global local dynamics, such as the selective use of global monitoring and recommendation, and also of the evidence-based medicine. For example, Japan follows the international trend of single embryo transfer in some countries, but the Medical Society in Taiwan chose the American model. This model needs to be further tested in other cases of making multiple babies, such as Australia with its world's best twin rates, and South Korea with its increasing births of multiples during the generous IVF subsidy program to boost the low birth rate. So I hope my presentation may become kind of cases that to attract more research on the some comparative studies. So thank you very much. I look forward to your comments, and thanks to the generous support from my university. So the book is open access. You can download the whole PDF from the publisher's website. So just type "making multiple babies" and you will find the link. Thank you.